right, welcome back everyone to our fourth track for the first day of the Enterprise Digital Transformation Virtual Conference Asia 2022. So first we have a presentation by Damian Cummings, Digital Strategy and Leadership at National University of Singapore, Institute of System Science on the Leading in the Age of Digital Transformation. So over to you, Damian.
Great, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Just give me a second until I get my screen share up.
Sure, go
Always
ahead.
takes a moment. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. What I want to do is spend, 20, 25 minutes really talking about leading in the age of digital transformation. A lot of topics talk about the technology. I'm going to talk about your role in the digital transformation world. So just before we begin, let me introduce myself. I'm the Chief of Digital Strategy and Leadership at the National University of Singapore inside the Institute of System Science, which is a very fancy way of saying I'm a professor. I lecture on digital transformation topics, and I've spent almost 30 years in this space. So before I moved into the world of academia last year, I was the CEO of a blockchain, Web3, and SaaS HR tech company called PeopleWave. So that was a great 5-year journey being very hands-on. But I've also held some nice kind of corporate jobs. I was the global head of digital at Standard Chartered. I was the chief marketing officer at Philips. I was also the regional marketing director at Samsung. And I've worked in kind of digital and similar roles in Dell, Coca-Cola, and I started out many years ago at McKinsey & Company. So I'm very much a practitioner, and what I'm going to present today is what I've learned through that 30 years of experience, but also what we teach in our master's level curriculum in NUS. I'm going to really talk about 4 things. Number one, what are the big digital changes? I mean, we live in the COVID pandemic era, and there have been significant digital transformation changes during that time. 2, I want to talk about those huge shifts. Those are mental shifts, skills changes, approach changes that you need to look at. I want to talk about how the web is evolving, about understanding Web 1, 2, and 3, what that is, and also what digital transformation really means. And finally, I want to finish up with the idea of disruption and how it's impacting your company, industry, and even you. So again, this is a bit of an eye chart, but really what I want to do here is give you a bit of a lay of the land. And I'm sure many other speakers have given you some fantastic insights. Let me just add a few more on top. What we saw in 2020 and now 2021 and now moving into halfway through 2022 is rapid, intense, compressed digital transformation. In 2020, we were forced to become digital transformation gurus. Every company, because of the COVID pandemic, was forced to go through their own version of digital transformation. We've also seen in the last 2 years, over 310 million consumers in Southeast Asia. There's actually 50 million new consumers coming online in Southeast Asia every year. That's led to a lot of transformation. And what we've seen is that transformation is, surprisingly enough, driven by CEOs. I say surprisingly because people like me have had head of digital job titles because we've been covering the gaps of CEOs and chairs. Those board level senior executives and C-level executives have simply not have the right skills to take their organization through digital transformation. But what we're seeing in Singapore and Southeast Asia is that CEOs have stepped up. They've learned new skills, they're driving change from the front, and that's the way it should be. We've seen there's been a change in the way that we work. Conferences like this just a couple of years ago would have always been face-to-face. But the idea of remote working, hybrid, and even digital HR is interesting. Now, of course, we've had to Frankenstein together a solution using Zoom, online meetings, Slack, Teams, etc. But what we're now seeing is that hybrid working become the norm. We're now seeing productivity tools, data-driven tools that are helping us with both performance, managing team well-being, and a whole bunch of new types of technology coming soon. I'll hold on that point on the top right corner, but in terms of what we've seen from the different verticals, e-commerce has actually rapidly increased over the past few years. In fact, Southeast Asia is the fastest growing region in the world, ahead of China, ahead of India, and ahead of the US in terms of gross merchandising value. Fintechs, everyone's probably got a fintech on their phone nowadays, but we're seeing Singapore specifically is the home of fintech. The government here has supported it, and the industry has grown tenfold over the past 5 years. If you're in the marketing world, you've actually seen the shift towards digital marketing happen for a long time, but the pandemic has really kind of crystallized it. And we're also seeing that we're all falling behind. There is a significant need for digital skills gaps. In fact, by 2025, there's forecasted that we all need at least 7 new digital skills to keep pace. That's anything from everybody being a data and analytics expert to getting into some of the cutting edge stuff such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and even quantum computing. But on the more simple level, digital literacy still remains a massive factor. And I just want to go back to the touching on the top right corner, the more tech disruption is coming. Yes, tech companies are laying off people at the moment, but the reality is there's been so much glut of venture capital spending that we're seeing a whole bunch of deep tech and technology companies coming through this part of the world. Now, what that means is, startups fail all the time, but what they also do is drive significant innovation. They get acquired by big companies, they spur change, and new technology comes into the market. So what we're seeing is now to 2030 is going to see a very significant shift in the types of tech coming, and Singapore and Southeast Asia is very much a deep tech market. So some very interesting things on the horizon. What does this all mean? It means your job is much more complicated than it used to be. So let me talk about some of the shifts that you need to think about to be a leader in the digital age. Those are mindset shifts, approach shifts, and new skills. First of all, there's an increase in certain things, and there's also a decrease in certain things. So what we're seeing is these kind of pair off against each other. There's an increase in soft skills. So what we realize is as you're climbing the corporate ladder, yes, if you're a technologist, it's going to help you get to manager level. But beyond manager level to director, vice president, C level, it's all about soft skills. And those soft skills are specifically communications, resilience, adaptability, stakeholder management, and change management. If you've got those 5, you're on the fast track of being a digital leader. It also means you have to adopt a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. What that means is curiosity, the ability to learn, and generally focusing on the positive rather than what you cannot do. It also means new ways of working. I find the best digital leaders are breaking down walls, ripping silos apart. And there are no rules in the world of business. You can do whatever you want. And we're finding great digital leaders just forge their own path while taking people on the journey with them. We're seeing department heads driving strategy, and we're seeing collaboration around developing digital transformation plans. My favorite part is the idea of speed. Fast is always better than perfect. Fast is better than perfect. And what we're seeing is it's come from startups and scale-ups and has been driven to large organizations to be fantastic at digital transformation, iterate, fail fast, move with speed. And of course, it's about asking questions rather than being told what to do. Again, helps with the growth mindset and so on. It also means these shifts are leading to a few things. In terms of mindset, leaders don't believe in boundaries. You will adopt your own. And of course, you need a growth mindset to get there. When it comes to approaches, everybody needs to be a strategist. Yes, it doesn't mean you need to roll up the sleeves and get hands-on. That still is required. But new ways of working, using things like lean, using agile methodologies, fast adaptive approaches is what's required. And as I said, your new skills, soft skills, adaptability, resilience, stakeholder management, and change management is what it's all about. And if you're in a leadership position, making sure your team is successful is critical. And if I just kind of summarize those in terms of skill shifts, we're seeing team leadership around soft skills. We're seeing a particular focus on change management and stakeholder management. Every department head can drive strategy. We need to be across emerging technology, but again, that's always a tough ask. And as I said, fast is better than perfect. So focus on getting something out the door rather than trying to spend months making it perfect. So let me kind of segue a little bit into, okay, those are some of the things you need from a personal level. Let me talk about what's happening in the world of the internet. You've probably heard a lot about Web 3.0, Web 3, the idea of the metaverse and so on. I just thought it might be worth taking a moment to explain what those things are and how it might impact your digital transformation journey. So again, forgive this kind of horrible chart here, but really we're living in a Web 2.0 world today. We evolved from a Web 1.0 world of Yahoo, AOL, Netscape, and then later Google, etc., into the Web 2.0 world of Facebook, social media, and application services like AWS, etc. But there's a new school of thought that says the future is Web 3, a decentralized web. So let me quickly explain those. So if you're old enough to remember the original dot-com boom or use services such as Yahoo, this is no surprise. It was the beginning of the internet back in the 90s. It was a static read-only web. Every company was in a race to create a brochure-like website, and the day was actually ruled by web portals such as Yahoo. Those days are now gone. We live in the Web 2.0 world. Now we've gone from what was a static web to what's called the contributor web. It means you can actually contribute to the internet. And think about that in a very simple way. If you're on Amazon, Lazada, Shopee, or similar e-commerce websites, if you buy a product from that website, you can leave a review. You can give it 1 to 5 stars. You can write content around that. And that is actually forever fixed to that particular web page. Social media is another one. Facebook fundamentally is an empty platform. It's filled up with the photos of your uncle or your cousin, or going out for drinks on the weekend, or the selfies you may take. You're contributing to that, and you're creating that web. It's a community and social focus, and behind the scenes APIs are connecting everything together. Web 3 is a little bit different. It's what's called the decentralized web. Underpinning that is the idea of decentralized ledgers and blockchain. It means that there's no one in charge. What that looks like is open source, trustless, and permissionless. That's given rise to cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, NFTs, decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs. But I think one point to note here is Web 3 is not an evolution of Web 2. It's a spin-off. I can't see any major tech company, Google, Salesforce, SAP, Meta, any of those companies giving up the centralized web. I think this is hopefully not a fairy tale, but I think we're seeing use cases for blockchain applications being built, but it's kind of over on the side. I think the real next evolution of the internet is going to be the immersive web, Web 4.0, which is the metaverse. Think about that as the matrix, where you have a fully immersive 3D environment, and frankly, you'll never need to leave that digital world. That's both scary and a very alluring prospect. But the metaverse, the true metaverse, Web 4.0, won't appear until the 2030s or 2040s. So we've still got a bit of time. Let me talk about digital transformation. So now I've set a little bit of the scene about what's happening, what you need to do as a leader yourself. Let me explain the definition of digital transformation. There's 3 types of digital: digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. Digitization is where you turn paper into an Excel spreadsheet. It's the most basic level of transformation. If you're doing this, great. It means you get really zero benefit as a company, very low business impact, but you've got rid of a whole bunch of paper. Digitalization is where most companies get stuck. This is where you're looking for a 20 or 30% improvement, a cut in costs, a shift in revenue as you build an e-commerce site from retail, etc. But again, it's incremental. You're going to add 20%, 30%. You're not going to transform the business. True digital transformation and being a leader in the digital age means you need to think about transformation. It's going to give you a massive impact, 10 times or 100 times growth. So that growth is going to be all about Netflix going from a CD that's getting sent to you by the post into a streaming media and original content giant. It changes entire industries. And if you're familiar with blue ocean strategy, it actually makes your competitors irrelevant. If I break that down a little bit further, these are the building blocks that you need to do to drive your digital transformation. So number 1 is a clear strategy. Number 2 is strong engagement, and that's where most people go wrong. Number 3 is innovation. It's got to get better. Number 4 is good tech. Number 5 is data analytics to signpost where you're going. But underpinning that is you. You need to have a very strong leadership group that is driving this strategy. You need the right culture that's adopted an environment of psychological safety where you can fail fast and move on. And your entire organization needs the right level of digital literacy and the skills to complete this transformation. But most transformations fail, 84%. They fail because of a number of reasons. And let me quickly whiz through those. A lot of it tends to fall in one of the first two categories. Now, the first one is not a failure, but it's more of a left turn. This is where you lack strategy in your digital transformation plan. If you have no strategy, you've done everything else right, you'll have an incremental impact, you'll add 20% more revenue. Great outcome. But it's not a transformation plan. The second part is where 70% of it goes wrong. It's a lack of engagement. Every organization in the world has what's called a frozen middle. Senior executives are super gung-ho and excited. Junior or new employees are very enthusiastic. It's the people who've been there a while that don't want to change processes, where they say no directly to you, or are saboteurs in the background, or simply don't want to engage in the change. That's where you face internal resistance and it tends to fall down. The others, if you don't have innovation, you're going to have incoherent action because everything needs to move forward. If you don't have the digital and digital transformation, i.e. the technology, you're going to be frustrated. And if you're not signposting everything with data, you're going to stagnate because you don't know whether you're improving or not. But the focus is get the strategy right, get the engagement right, the rest tends to sort itself out. And the final thing I want to leave you with in the last 5 minutes is the idea of, are you going to be disrupted? Now, this is some great work out of Accenture from a couple of years ago, but I think it still stands today. This is 4 quadrants, and you've got to think about where your industry is. The top left-hand corner is about viability. These are people that have weathered the storm. Publishing houses, for example. A few years ago, when Amazon became the big bookseller came out, all the publishing houses were getting rid of paper, no longer publishing physical books in the same way. They weathered that storm, and now there are more novels, books, and literature being published than ever before. It just so happens to be digital and ebooks that the focus is. Down at the bottom is durable industries, alcoholic beverages. It's unlikely that the formula of alcoholic beverages is going to be digitized. Of course, the go-to-market will change, the supply chain will change through digital, but the core product probably won't. It's a durable industry. The more challenging industries are the volatile industries in the top right-hand corner. You don't want to be there. If you're a consumer retail bank, a hotel, consumer technology companies, you get existential threats every day. The vulnerable businesses, the ones that are at threat, but again, they came with the storm with some business model changes. Healthcare providers, power providers, and so on. If I break that down, when you think about your own business and how you need to go through this, there are 2 things to think about. The most disrupted industries have very low barriers to entry and also have very large legacy business models where they're making most of their money. So media is a classic example of that. Anyone can become a media outlet overnight. And of course, they make most of their money from advertising. So those 2 things leave them extremely vulnerable. Any change to the distribution or the way they make money means that they're out of business. And that's why Google and Facebook are the biggest media companies in the world now. So if you look at that, media, telecom, consumer financial services, retail, tech, insurance, if you're in any of those categories, you face severe disruption. Get out or change or be a digital leader and go through your transformation. Just a quick point on this one. If I look at the top 10 most innovative companies, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, all those top 10 are all tech companies. The rest of that list are companies that have invested so much into their digital and into their technology, they're almost like a tech company anyway. Walmart, Nike, etc., Netflix, all those companies are not tech companies, but again, are enabled by serious tech. So if you're not on this top 50 list of the most innovative, or you think you're at the risk of disruption, really have a bit of a reflection about what you can do as a leader. Are you in the right industry? How can you pivot towards the big mega trends that are happening at the moment, and what else can you do? And as a final reflection, just a few things. So as a digital leader, you need new mindsets, new skills and approaches to lead this change. And again, it's happening rapidly. Most digital transformations fail, often due to employee resistance or a lack of strategy. And digital disruption is here and is going to impact you. So it's not someone else's problem, and it's not a problem for tomorrow. It's a problem for today, and it's a problem for you. With that, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Damien, for that great presentation. Yeah, as what Damien said, if you have any questions for him, you can just reach out to him directly by clicking on the People tab, looking for Damien there, and sending him a private message. I'm sure Damien would be more than happy to answer these for you. Thanks again, Damien.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, up next, we have a panel session. Digital culture, what does it mean? How do we get there? We have the panelist Fadli Rasad, ICEEC, Enterprise Agile Coach at Bank of Singapore. We have AJ Wadwa, Head Global Business Services at Indorama Ventures. We have Dan Ramirez, Business Excellence Head at Insular. And Bob Fox, our moderator, Chairperson at JFCCT and EABC, Digital Economy. All right, we have everyone here. Perfect. So go ahead. Over to you, Bob.
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Let me just get the slide ready so that we can share that as well. I just want to check the audio. Is that working now?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly,
Okay,
Bob.
great. Thank you. I'm just trying to share the screen, and that doesn't seem to be wanting to work. Just a minute. Let me try that again. So I'm not sure if this is working.
Yeah, it's working.
Working now. You can see the slide pack.
Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So again, good afternoon. This whole conference is about digital transformation. What we're talking about in this particular panel discussion is something that may sound like all to do with soft skills. Well, it's a little bit more than that. Digital culture, what does it mean and how do we get there? So on our panel today, we have Ajay Wadha, who is the Global Business Services Head for Indorama Ventures. He has been heavily involved in change management, improving processes for many years, and is, by confession, a chartered accountant. Fadli Rashad is an enterprise agile coach, and he believes strongly in adopting agile means for business transformation. He's also asked me to mention that besides being an audiophile and an avid learner, in his spare times, he likes to ensure watching cartoons with his kids, a source of inspiration. Dan Ramirez is a business transformation professional and a certified Lean Six Sigma practitioner. He says that you have to start with the culture first. Only then organizations can humanize the businesses for both the employee and the customer. Be future ready rather than future proof. So that's our panel for today. What we're going to do very briefly after the introduction is do a quick outline of the topic. And then each person on the panel will share a few thought starters, 3 minutes each, and then we'll have a probing dialogue around these topics. So on to the next thing then. Some themes. We're going to talk about what is culture. Culture might be a set of norms, a set of principles, a set of rules for interaction and engagement. What is transformation? The previous speaker talked about 3 levels: digitalization, and digital transformation. So there are different ways of looking at that, but certainly the idea of at least getting to digitalization where there is a way of interacting and being interoperable is a very important thing. And then the third theme is what really makes it work. So we're going to hear the experiences of our 3 panel members today. Think about what the opposite of being digital is. Maybe it's being analog or being offline, or maybe it's not being able to participate or benefit. In 1995, think about how long ago that was. Nicholas Negroponte published this book, Being Digital. And I would say if you read it today, we're still not fully digitalized. We are still grappling with some concepts and learning to do this. In terms of transformation, we can think about the transformation occurring at multiple levels. One of them is the personal level, the company level, the industry level, and then the economy wide level. And then on the supranational level, there is the global interoperability and the global interaction amongst economies. But the point is that if we don't know how to do this at the personal level, we're not going to be very successful in doing it at the wider scope levels. Digital literacy has been mentioned. I prefer this broad definition, which is published by the IMDA in Singapore, to a narrower one that simply talks about computer literacy. So this is the ability to use, create, and share digital content, ability to use technology, understand what's out there, how to process information optimally, media literacy, and then cyber wellness. Know what to be suspicious of in the online world, how to understand what fake news is, how to appreciate the need to use fact checking, and be on top of using digital tools. I like this slide because if speed and agility are more important than being perfect, then very often things don't happen according to a plan. You might find inspiration, you might find ways of doing things that get implemented quickly in these sort of ways. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. And now I will ask Ajay to spend some time, a few minutes, just giving his outline.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for sharing the overall context and the purpose of this session. So, just to share the perspective on the digital culture while I'm sharing my screen as well. Are you able to see my screen? Sure. So in our previous sessions, I think we did talk about how this digital transformation is important for the organization and also for the larger economies. But that transformation is possible when if and when we have a good digital culture in an organization. And culture is not about changing the mindset of the people, though it's important. We need to have the people who understand the overall vision of the organization, strategy of the organization around digital transformation, and need to be upskilled for that, because it's the people who are going to make it happen and who will help in achieving the overall objectives of digital transformation for the benefit of the organization. But can people alone achieve this overall objective of digital transformation? Answer is no. They can achieve it only if the entire ecosystem or infrastructure is also provided to them to work upon it. Assume a situation we have upskilled people who understand about digitalization, but if we give them the legacy old ERPs which are not even connected with each other and they are not given any additional technologies to work upon, can we achieve the digital transformation objective? Answer is no. So we really need to work on the overall ecosystem. We need to provide them infrastructure and the tools and technologies which they can work upon and need to be upskilled on it, and also provide the structure, organization structure, in such a way that everything moves towards the same north direction, that everybody is working in achieving the digitalization and digital transformation for the organization as well. And at the same time, we need to have a culture where we have the agility and appetite for failure as well. Because if we kind of look at it, in today's scenario, it's the survival of the fastest. When we are working on certain transformation in a faster way, there will be failures as well. But at the end of the day, we will achieve those objectives and successes as well. So we need to have a risk of appetite and that agility in the organization. So that's the kind of culture which we need to provide to the people, and with the ecosystem entire, we can achieve that. I mean, I'll just normally give that example when we are talking about digital transformation of India, the way Mr. Narendra Modi worked on the digitalization. He, on one side, he trained the people on how to use the payment platforms or other platforms to go digital. But that was not the only thing which he stopped at it. He created the entire infrastructure around it, connected the entire payment portals with the bank so that it's made easier. And now, when we looked at, and the experiences in COVID also taught us, every small payments are being made through this digital network. So just to summarize my perspective on this, if we want to achieve our digital transformation objectives, we really need to work on the entire ecosystem of it, which includes people, technology, and also the structure of that. That's how we need to work upon it. Thank you for this session, and look forward to hearing from everybody on that. Back to you, Bob.
Yes, thank you, Ajay. And next, Fadli.
All right, let me share my screen. Just give me a moment, please. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
All right, so thank you so much, Bob, for the opportunity to share my thought. So the idea of digital culture, because we are talking about culture here, is that we start with looking at from two perspectives. One is the digital transformation itself, which I believe this is the primary theme of the session today, and also the other part, which is the agile transformation. But what the objective that we want to achieve from this transformation is actually to transform our business. Okay, so it's to transform our business, and we need to be basically be mindful that when you talk about digital transformation, it's actually goes deep beyond just utilizing tools or technologies. There is a mindset behind that needs to change as well. Okay, so if we overemphasize on the tools, then we might lose the essence of the transformation, the driver of the transformation, which is the people. Okay, now I would like to invite everyone here to look back on the manifesto or agile values that was created or defined like 20 years back. Okay, and the very first line in the agile manifesto talks about this one: individuals and interaction over processes and tools. So what's important here when we talk about transformation, when we talk about making changes in our business, is to look into the people, the individual interactions. If we are focusing much on the enablers itself without focusing on how these enablers can help the people to interact, then basically this is going to be a problem, because it's going to disrupt the digital culture that we are trying to shape here. Okay, and again, this is one of the essence that normally, or the missing ingredient that normally transformation fails, because we overemphasize on one aspect and we lose the other aspect of it. So yep, that's basically a piece of my thought just for initial conversation, so that we can have more perspective about this digital culture. Over to you, Bob.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fadli. And now, Dan, your opening thoughts.
Jed, can you share my slides? I'm pretty sure that all of us are undergoing our very own digital transformation journey today. And true enough, digital transformation has become an imperative, but it has come to mean so many things that it became almost meaningless. Therefore, a lot of organizations we see today are stuck in the illusion that they are truly digital, when in fact, they're just doing digital. As Damien said, digitalization only. And on the next slide, when you talk about a digital organization, it's tantamount to having said that you have a digital culture as well. You cannot talk about having a digital culture without transforming your architecture, which is the way that you are organized, meaning your setup, your organizational structure. We also need to talk about your accelerators, how you operate as well, meaning your processes, technology platforms, talent, and the most important part are the enablers. These are your leaders, policies, performance management that drives the behavior. And digital organizations organize, operate, and behave in very specific ways, very much different from traditional businesses. So there are four foundational digital values that should be reflected in your culture to become successful in today's environment, the digital age. One is impact, speed, openness, and autonomy. And what's very interesting here is that while these values were cited among digital native companies, they are also validated by leaders of more traditional companies undergoing their own transformation. So, how do these values look in practice? But before that, I think everyone will resonate to the question, how can we transform a more traditional organization while preserving some of the traits that made it successful? So on the last part, you will see here the four, no, on the previous slide, sorry, Jed. On the bottom part, you will see here that there is a possible alignment between the practices that digital natives have established and then alignment with the traditional practices that are present in the others. What do we do then? We build the practices that are needed for success, and experimentation, self organization are really tied up to openness, autonomy, speed, and impact. And what's the challenge here in building these capabilities is that we need to find new ways of measuring innovations. We can't use traditional financial oriented reporting to measure innovations. Second is we need to preserve what makes the difference. In too many instances, the risk of transformation is to throw away everything, and that's not really the reality. There are traditional models that have been able to establish level of stability and integrity that allows stakeholders to be at ease. So these are valuable practices that need to be nurtured and preserved. And lastly, we have to reorient what could drag you in the past. And these practices are heavily rooted in past practices that needed to be challenged. And we need to make sure that all of these practices are intentionally embedded. So on the next slide, the most important part in the transformation is knowing where you are so that you could actually understand how you can make the critical shifts. I will not go through all the shifts here, but the digital transformation will becomes a challenge not on the technical aspect, but because of the need to reshape the intimate culture of our organizations. Despite the high rate of failure, as Damon showed, it is important to start with culture. And this does not mean that we have to get away from the traditional practices, but we have to carefully mix the best of both worlds. And above all, we have to take into conscious consideration on what needs to be changed, when and how, and clearly understand ownership and clearly define what digital transformation is that is tantamount to having a digital culture.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Okay, we're now going to go into, for the rest of our time, we're going to go into some probing questions. So there's no right answer to this, but we're going to really probe some issues. And today's theme, of course, for this particular session is about digital culture. So soft skills are very important, attitudes, values, etc. In the wider context, again, of the whole conference today, it's about digital transformation, but we're focused here on digital culture and the issues around that. So I want to start in this style. We're going to do quick questions from each of you. on a number of topics and themes. The first one is, how do we make an organization ready? We describe the critical success factors or the attributes of organizations, but as practitioners, once we get into a company or some other kind of organization, we don't see all those ideal values. So let's look at the very first thing you might do. Is it a situation audit? Dan talked about impact, speed, openness, and autonomy. So what do we mean by autonomy? But I'm going to just ask each of you briefly then for a quick answer on what's the first thing you do. You've got a new assignment. What's the first thing you look at? Let's start with RJ.
Sure. Bob, if I get into any assignment and I have to work on this, first thing which I will work on, what is the vision which we draw for that organization? So what do we want to achieve? And then comes is how to achieve that part. So that is something which we need to define in a structured way. So how part would include that, what is the upskilling of the people do we need to do, who are the people who are going to make it possible, then the bringing everybody up to the speed, and then the required infrastructure for that. So that infrastructure we need to invest on, whether it is in terms of the technology which we need to bring in, which technologies are required, and in alignment with the vision which we have. So the investment and planning for that, and defining what, who, and how that needs to be implemented on that, and then bringing in the structure towards it. So who would be overall accountable for that, the digitalization piece, and then who all would be enabling that functions? Because in an organization, if we have to achieve the overall uh, the transformation or digitalization, everybody has to contribute to it and everybody has to work towards it. So it has to be clearly aligned with the overall digital objectives of it, and it's clearly aligned with vision and strategy of the organization.
Okay, very good. Fadley?
Right. So basically, when we start with something, I always believe that we need to understand the intention behind first. Basically,
Okay.
what's the expectation? Why we are doing it, and why now, for example, right? So I usually call it as the wake up calls. So what is our wake up calls to do this? And again, there's no right and wrong. There's no perfect way of doing it in the beginning. We always need to experiment first. Experiment first. Start small. We start small, experiment, and then we get the we get the team basically familiar with it. We get the team into shape, and then we can scale it out into a bigger teams, right? So the idea here is we always start from the intention behind, bring everyone together, and then start small, and then keep refining it along the way.
Okay, very good. That's a good start. Dan, quick thoughts on, you got a new assignment. What's your first move?
You really have to assess where you are in terms of your digital maturity in the organization. That's where change happens, when you already know where you stand, so that you can direct and pivot to the right direction. In terms of on our end, we had a digital maturity assessment test, including leaders, including staff, everyone in the organization, to assess where we are between, are we in the exploring phase, are we in the doing? Are we in the becoming? Or are we in the being? Of course, the being digital, truly being digital is the target. But we assess that we are still between doing and becoming. So you have to assess where you are currently so that you can eventually pivot to the right direction. Because if everyone doesn't know where you stand today, then you really cannot go where you really want it to be, which is to become truly digital.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's explore the idea of agility then. By analogy, we'll look at software development. So, a software development project in the traditional old way, people refer to as waterfall. You specify your requirements, um, you engage the developers. Nobody can possibly, as it turns out, see and foresee what problems you might have come up with. But nevertheless, the waterfall model says that you're supposed to be able to specify everything up front. And then when there's a change, you go through a rather expensive and cumbersome formal change management project. As we know, the agile approach is to continually review and start off, and that's a much more realistic way of dealing with things. But how do we stick to our original objectives in terms of being agile? How do we make sure we're not just going off the reservation, as it were, and doing something that feels good, sounds fine, but is not actually coming back to the objective? So let's talk about that. I'll change the order a little bit. Let's start with Fadley this time. Agile.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you rightly pointed out, Bob. I mean, feeling good. So when we talk about adopting agile, people are usually right. There are still misconceptions that they start doing the practices, but then basically they lose touch on the reason behind the intention behind why they are doing it in the first place, because they just keep doing it, and then they lose. So that's the reason why when I mentioned in my first conversation earlier, is that it's always important to understand why we are doing it in the first place and put it on the wall like a statement, right? That basically this is why we are going to do this. So understanding the intention, which is the business problem we are trying to solve. So there's a business problem, for example. This is the business problem we are trying to solve. So let's go towards that. So we are using this. We are making use of agility as a means, not as an objective. It's a means to solve this business problem. So that's why we start with that point, and then we keep reminding the team that basically this is how we are going. So it's pretty common that people lose track. It's pretty common. We just need to keep reminding, guys, look, we are doing this differently now. So let's always keep inspect and adapt. So that's the principle in agility. Keep inspecting and adapt.
Okay, very good. Keep inspecting and adapting. Dan, what are your thoughts on this?
Most of us understand how agile works in business
Mhm.
and not just in software development lifecycle, but it really affects and changes the way that we work, operate, and behave. But more than that, I think that the main enabler for agility to spread throughout the organization is how you are organized internally as an entire organization. Are you still the question that you have to ask yourself is that, are you still structured in a hierarchical way that doesn't enable a network of teams? It's a different thing to mastering the agile ceremonies like Scrum, stand-up meetings, sprints, without having the right structure in place that enables a network of teams to enable agility in the organization. That's my take.
Okay. Ajay?
So I agree with the point of view from Fed and Dan, but just to add a little bit, Bob, to your question as well. So while we are agile, we are not losing focus on what we want to achieve as well. So that, I think, the only key aspects in that we should keep a structure to it. So we are defining an objective, and then when we are working on it, we need to be agile of achieving that, the ways and means of doing that. We might find out that a particular way of achieving that overall objective is not working fine, and we should be flexible enough to change it. The only word of caution in case of agile methodology is we should go with a structured approach, not that okay, we will see it later what happens. Then in that case, if we see it later approach, then we tend to lose our focus on the overall objective. That's the only piece I would put add to the agility.
Okay, very good. I want to explore now, again, coming back to the theme of digital culture. I'd like each of you to talk about two potential disaster scenarios that have occurred. You can sanitize with names and things, but talk about briefly two, or one if you like, scenarios where you thought everything was going to collapse. If a large number of digital transformation projects are unsuccessful, think of one that either didn't work or just about didn't work. But um, tell us about the scenarios and what happened there briefly. Um, let's start with Dan this time.
Okay, I had to find the unmute button. Digital transformation is a high risk project. It's very expensive. It involves a lot of change, and it will involve a lot of resistance. And leaders are key in terms of selling it to the entire organization. One of the one of the key challenges when we were trying to implement an agile way of working in the organization is to make sure how do we measure now and shift away from KPIs to OKRs, if you are familiar with that. How do we shift away from completing activities and task based goals versus outcomes? And the second one, the challenge that we had is how do we measure innovation and new ways of working rather than in a traditional way of a financial metric as well? And the last one that top of my mind is how do we now obsess with our customers? Everyone's into customer experience, and I would really say I'm a CX professional. I would say the CX is really a key differentiator, but it will become your key differentiator if enabled by the right technology. How do you now obsess rather than focused? So there's a very big difference with that. So those three things, I think those are key. One of our challenges when we were trying to go through our journey of digital transformation.
Mm, okay. Um, Fadli, potential disaster scenario. What happened?
Well, there are a few, but primarily is if I would say personally, because when you talk about culture, it's about values, it's about behaviors, belief system, right? And it's heavily influenced by this thing called mindset. So if the mindset is not there, then it's going to affect whatever transformation we are trying to do. So now, if you go back a bit, so let's talk about, for example, agile as a case in this case, right? So when we are trying to adopt agility, there are two aspects that is going to change: the way we work and the way we think. So if you only change the way we work, but we don't change the way we think, that would be the first recipe of
Mm,
disaster,
okay.
and it's going to affect the whole culture. And if I want to add on top of what Dan mentioned earlier, the structure shapes the culture. How we structure the organization is going to affect how the culture is going to be look like.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. RJ, war stories?
Sure. I probably can share a practical example. I probably would not name the companies here, but
Yeah.
the key challenge where I observed is the company started with the digitalization or digital culture implementation, looking at how the other company, how the industry is doing. So it's something which is must to have it. But when we are putting a strategy or when we are putting our objectives, that needs to be defined as per the company's needs and requirements and aligned with the overall objectives of the company. How is it going to meet the objectives of the organization? And that's how it fuels the entire efforts and the ecosystem to achieve those objectives. Because at the end of the day, whatever we are doing is to achieve the overall objectives of the business, whether it is in terms of uh, of reducing the cost or standardization or anything which we need to do. Over a period of time, we realized that, oh, this is something, it is good for other companies, but this is not achieving our objective. That's where management lose focus because of the investment and the effort going into it, and then the entire program loses its charm in it. So that's the major one, because it's again linked to what we want to achieve and why we want to achieve it. That needs to be very clear and aligned with the company's overall vision.
Okay. I'd like to throw each of you a challenge. So we have seen in a big tech world in the past almost a decade the value of disruption, and the idea that disruption itself is, in some people's mind, a virtue. That is, let's change things, let's change the world, let's change the way we do things. But as we've learned, there have been some very negative consequences. For example, um, one big tech company referred to the other big company that runs a platform as being like cigarettes, meaning that it was evil, that it was causing divisions in society, that it was causing hurt to people, etc., and it was uncontrolled. So some kind of regulation was needed. Today, in fact, this very day, I was in a regional conference concerning fintech fintech in the telco world. And regulators are now talking about, quotes, responsible disruption. In other words, putting a boundary on disruption. So there is a different value set coming in, a different mindset saying that it's good to be innovative, it's good to change things, but whatever we launch, we should do it in a way that adds value. So we didn't get to that point 5 years ago. We all believe that you put something out there, you see if it works, and then if you're a promoter of it, you might defend it against people saying that it's causing bad things to happen. But in terms of digitalization, in terms of digital transformation, and most importantly, in terms of the culture and our mindset towards it, is this a positive move that we're now seeing a concept of responsible disruption? Should we be uh, pre-qualifying almost what we do and what we explore by the idea that it's going to have to be uh, used responsibly? Let me have
Yeah,
your
but Bob,
thoughts on this. We'll start with
yeah,
you,
Bob,
Phil.
yeah, I'd like to start this.
All right, you start with that. Go
This
ahead.
is one of my studies before. I think one of the key challenges for the next few years would be ethics and technology. Just this question: do you think if we're gonna invent? Do you think we're gonna invent machines that lie? I think we all say the same answer. Of course, we've already invented machines that could lie. We've been there. And in the past, I think that organizations are starting to realize that with great power also comes with great responsibility. And in the future, it would be necessary to have people that come in to check the algorithm of what you are doing, if it's doing what it should do, and that it's not cheating on customers. Just as an example, there was an experiment in Korea where this lady had an opportunity to meet up with her little girl that was unfortunately passed away before the technology came in. So this lady did a virtual reality, and she went to the park and she saw her little girl. They used the video images, the voice, etc. It's almost real. It's very good quality. The question is, would I let my children do this when I pass away if they want to keep me alive virtually? Right now, is that a good or a bad thing? Honestly, I don't even know. But the question is, should we do it even if we could do it? Another thing to bring it closer today, about a year ago, Amazon released a bracelet called the Halo Bracelet. It's like an Apple Watch where it could monitor all the things about your health, but it can also measure your emotion based on the tone of your voice. So it can detect if you're happy or if you're sad or if you're angry. I don't know what Amazon will do with the data, but it does give them the capability to link your emotions to your buying behavior. What if they discover that if you're really happy, you are keen into paying 5% more? What if they discover that if you're really sad, then you're into buying more things? I don't think they would do anything with it, but they have the power to do something with it when you have all the data. But the question is, should you do that? And on the flip side, we need to understand also the dark side of customer experience, and it's already happening as we know it. And I know everyone would agree listening to that, to those points of mine.
Okay, so this is a very complex, I would say, new area that obviously people are much more concerned about than they were, say, 5 years ago.
Mm,
Fadley, what are
yep,
your thoughts?
yep. So, all right. So basically, when we go back a bit about the culture, since we spoke about culture earlier, and it's actually about people. And again, as what Dan mentioned, is ethics are playing important role here. But let's step back for a moment and see that the definition of disruptive here. Who defines that, right? Who defines that, and who is actually being impacted by that? So one of the important of shaping a culture is to listen to everyone's perspective first, to understand from perspective from multiple aspects, right? So I mean, it's not only from one aspect but from other aspects. Okay, so this could be positive for one part, but this could be negative from another part. However, the intention behind needs to be understood and well communicated. Then only, then only we can appreciate this so-called disruptive technology. Yeah. So the conversations needs to happen first.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much. Unfortunately, due to a technical issue, we've lost RJ temporarily, but the clock is moving on. So let's get to a point where we've only got less than 5 minutes left. So I'd like to end with a thought from each of you as to, in terms of digital culture, obviously, we've talked about what culture is, we've talked about the importance of culture, and we've said it's about a lot of it is about people and willingness to collaborate, willingness to work together, um, willingness to get something done fast rather than perfectly, and toleration of making a mistake, as long as I would suggest that you can recover from it. So you shouldn't just make a mistake for its own sake, but you should do it potentially through an earnest effort to get to yes, and then if something happens, you've got a way of recovering. What are your final thoughts on your advice, your final parting advice on looking at making sure we have the right digital culture to succeed in these transformations? Start with you, Fadley.
I only have two thoughts basically. So the first one is that start small, because every transformation is an experimentation, and as Bob, you rightly pointed out, that there is a risk that is going to be involved. So let's try to minimize the risk by start small, and then we increase from there. And
Okay.
the second point, which is very important, is also missed out, is that when making decisions, it's important to co-create those decisions, not just from one people or one person to many, but involve others, because this decision is going to affect the culture of the organization, of the team, or of the community. So yeah, that's from me.
Okay, very good. That's very helpful. We haven't got RJ back yet. Dan, would you like to provide your
Yeah,
exit
sure.
comment?
Launching technology projects is just a starting point. The ultimate goal is to move from building systems and processes to building capabilities, building a culture where innovation is the norm and where employees will constantly seek and learn and grow in the most of the best new technologies and techniques. I see a mix of three disciplines that would fit the transformation need and the mindset shift, and that should be extended to a maximum level possible to enable correct practices in any organization. Number one is design thinking. You have to explore the right problem. It's the best tool available to enable new customer orientation more in line with digital practices. Second is lean. You have to design the right thing efficiently. It can really help you reorient the excessive focus on rules by correctly prioritizing what needs to be kept and what needs to be modified. And lastly, agility or agile, building the right thing. It will help you create a framework for experimentation. So the advantage of these three things, design thinking, lean, and agile, is that these mindsets and methodologies are very rooted in practices that can be easily accessible by more traditional organizations, not just the digital native ones. So it's the transformation is really a mix of practices between digital natives and the more traditional ones. It's really finding the right areas where you really want it to change and keep. That's it for me.
Okay, and we've got Ajay back just in time. Ajay, we're doing final thoughts on what is your parting advice about success in getting the culture right, digital culture for successful transformation.
So, so from my perspective, we need to focus on the overall ecosystem. Yes, we need to invest a lot on people, having the right structure in place, the organization overall, and bringing them up to speed, giving them education around what's latest is happening, what's the technology advancement is there, and what industry is doing, so that people can be more aware about it, and that will help them bring in more and more thoughts, at the same time giving them the required infrastructure and the ecosystem to get this digitalization right.
Okay, excellent. That brings us to the end of our session. What we've experienced this afternoon in this session is some insights from three very engaged, real hands on practitioners. And I'd like to thank each of you, Ajay, Fadli, and Dan, for your insights, your time, and your contribution to the real thought leadership that's gone on today. So thank you very much. Thanks to ESCOM for organizing this, and very much appreciated. So I believe that our few little slides, which are not full presentations, but thought starters, we'll figure out a way to perhaps make those available. We'll take that offline afterwards. Thank you very much, everybody.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone. Bye
everyone.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bob. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
By
very
the
much.
way, Bob, we have a question here from Mulyadi Liu. I'll show it on stage. It's a two-part question.
I think we've lost Dan.
Maybe one of you can just give him a quick answer.
Um, Let me read it out. How to overcome traditional employee mindset culture with high resistance through digital transformation, e.g., hard copy is more convenient than soft copy. What kind of engagement should organizations implement practically? This is a very good question, and frankly, I'll just make a quick comment that we all experience the idea that somehow the hard copy wet signature version is more valuable and credible. So one contribution I would make is you need to have a good regulatory environment that says that any digitalized version, and I don't mean just a soft copy, but a fully digitalized version with interoperability and the ability to use it amongst different government agencies, for example, etc., is really essential to overcoming this great resistance. I think we've lost Dan, but we still have somebody still on the line who could add a comment to this.
Yep, yep. So I like this question. So okay, now when we talk about process change, like this kind of change, right? What happened is that it's not that people doesn't want to change. It's way beyond that. It's that they have a concern about, if this is changed, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my influence? What's going to happen to my power, for example? So we need to understand those concerns first. So there is one very good tool that usually we use is called empathy mapping. Many people using it on the design thinking, but you can use the same template, empathy map, to have some set of questions to ask to the process owner or the system owners about what are their concerns about all of these change, why they resist about it. So don't talk so much about the benefit first, understand their concerns first. Then we can talk about solution. Because at the end of the day, People resist not because they don't want it or they don't have money, it's because they have concern about it. Yep, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Ajay, would you like to do a quick comment?
Sure. So I completely agree with Fadli on this. So we really need to understand the reason for resistance. So it's not that people don't want to do it. It's just that it could be the reason that they are not aware about it. They don't know the objective of it. So they don't understand how is it going to impact them. So maybe they need to be educated. They need to be trained. They need to be brought up to speed. So we really need to address that resistance part of those employees who need to understand, or we need to get on board, and then address it accordingly. And there is no single recipe for addressing the overall resistance. We really need to understand on people to people or case to case basis what exactly the resistance is for, and then address it accordingly. One thing is for sure, for these kind of a program, we need people on board with us who can support wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, we are over time now. So again, thanks everybody, and uh, really interesting. I'm sure that this whole world is going to become more complex as regulation becomes heavier, and the requirements for the right kind of outcomes in the digital transformation are more appreciated. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the rest of the panelists. Great discussion.
Thank you very much.
So that is a wrap for our digital culture talk, and that is a wrap for the first day of our Enterprise Digital Transformation Asia Conference 2022. But we still have four tracks tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m. Singapore time. So hope everyone can still join us tomorrow. Also, after we close this session, everyone is still invited to engage with one another in the platform, specifically in the booths. We'll still keep the booths open for everyone to visit us. So thanks again, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.